Chapter 1. The deserted trail past Copperbit Canyon. "There she is," the pony shouted. "Seize her! Giddy up!" The voices woke Daring Do from a sleep so deep that she had almost forgotten where she was. A quick glance around reminded the pony adventurer that she was still in a tent in the middle of nowhere, with no pony but herself to rely on. After 5 days spent crossing the San Pelomino Desert and battling the dry, energy-sapping heat and the raging sandstorms, Daring Do was now going to have to protect the jewel-encrusted doomed diadem of Ch1 from some ruffian cow-ponies who didn't know it was good for them. Again. The yellow Pegasus adjusted her tan pith helmet with the green band around it and peered through a rip in the side of her crude hut. Through the swath of dusty canvas, Daring Do could see the shadowed outlines of the gang on the horizon. She sighed heavily, like a pony who has to keep swatting mosquitoes away. Ever since Daring retrieved the diadem from its crumbling shrine on the edge of the desert, there had been several gangs of thieves hot on her gray and black tail. She thought she'd lost all of them for good, having been alone for almost a whole day. She'd reckoned that a few hours spent shaded from the harsh rays were harmless enough. Daring silently cursed herself for falling asleep, but it was too late for regrets. There was only time to take action and to defend her treasure. Luckily, Daring Do was the one pony who was practically made for the task. "Give us the crown, Daring Do," a brown stallion shouted. He was no longer shrouded in silhouette. She noted his familiar wide-brimmed cow-pony hat and dusty red kerchief. When her quest had taken her across the San Pelomino, Daring Do had suspected that the Wild Bunch gang might turn up. Slingshot and his ragtag robber sidekicks, North Star and Spaghetti Slim, would stop at nothing to bag some loot. But these fortune-seekers were different from her. Their research into their motives were sloppy. All they cared about was money. It didn't matter to them whether it was stolen bits from a bank or a priceless relic rescued from a crumbling temple. If the items in question would buy them cider and other favors from their boss, Old Tex, it was theirs for the taking. Except if it belonged to Daring Do, of course. Apparently, this was a lesson she was going to have to teach them again. "Nice try, Slingshot," Daring Do burst forth from the hut, scooping up the sparkling diadem and other belongings in one swift motion. She whipped her foreleg around, snagged the fabric of her tent, and let the canvas wrap everything into a neat package. She then swung the strap across her shoulder and smoothed down the collar of her green adventure shirt, checking to make sure her map was still in her left chest pocket. Daring Do puffed up and shouted across the expanse, "You are wasting your energy, cow-ponies. Take my advice. Save some of that giddy up to get back to your camp before Old Tex catches you and turns your hide into his new holsters. You're never going to get the crown from me." "Is that so?" Slingshot called back, kicking up his forelegs to challenge her. "Unfortunately for you, yes." Out of the corner of her eye, Daring Do scanned the surroundings, but felt like she was looking through a fish-eye lens. The haze of sleep hadn't completely worn off, and she'd been traveling for days. There was a distinctive cactus in the distance that Daring remembered seeing the last time she trekked through this way. It looked like a big, prickly hot air balloon. She recalled that it was near the border of the desert, but also recalled that it was at least another 4 hours' walk before there were any pony towns to disappear into. The open desert left her nowhere to lie low. The only cover was a smattering of spiky green cacti plants in sparse clumps and gigantic tumbleweeds blowing across the ground every so often. The only way to lose the Wild Bunch gang this time would be by flying up into the cloudless sky, but North Star, Slingshot's right hoof pony, was a Pegasus too. And though the burly navy blue stallion was a little slow on the uptake, he was pretty fast in the air. A sky chase could go on for just as long as a land one. Daring kept a stony expression. Maybe she could win this one by coercion. "I'd advise you all," she raised an eyebrow and motioned with her hoof, "to move along, little ponies." "I'm afraid we can't do that, ma'am." Slingshot smirked through the scruff on his face. "See, we've been following you ever since you passed through Copperbit Canyon." Slingshot narrowed his blue eyes and took off his hat, revealing a flat blue mane that clung to his head with sweat. He pretended to be very concentrated on rubbing some dirt off the brim of his hat as he spoke, a tactic to show how disinterested he was in anything Daring had to say or do, when really it was just the opposite. That trek through Rattlesnake Gulch was no trot in the park on a Sunday either. "Really?" Daring Do laughed, taking a few steps closer. "I had no problem with those snakes. You and your boys sure are getting soft. Look here, little lady." North Star coughed as he wiped the brow of his white kerchief. He looked like he was about to go hooves up from the stifling dry heat. Maybe he wouldn't be able to outfly her after all. You expecting us to leave the treasure when we, need it. I mean, we should get it, 'cause you have it, and we're wanting it, and, He looked down at his hooves in confusion. Slingshot rolled his eyes. I think what my buddy here is trying to say is that we ain't going back empty-hoofed. Yeah, Northstar nodded. Full-hoofed. Spaghetti swung his rope lasso, hoping to drum up some fear. So just toss over the crown, and no pony needs to get hurt. You're done, Do. Slingshot nodded. In agreement. That crown is ours as sure as a tumbleweed tumbles. That's your problem right there, fellas. Daring chuckled. She patted the treasure, safely tucked into her makeshift canvas bag. You don't even know what it is you're trying to steal from me. Daring Do reached inside and pulled the diadem out into plain sight. The stallions gasped. Just because I'm such a history buff, you'll have to indulge me. Hoof it here, Slingshot growled, stomping the ground with his hooves. How about a lesson? Daring continued, ignoring the command. This beauty here is the doomed diadem of Shalati, and it belongs to the Empress of the Desert Skies. Daring Do smoothed the hoof over the golden relic, which was encrusted with stunning sapphires and diamonds. Rays of desert sun bore down on the treasure, causing hundreds of tiny rainbows to reflect and shine onto the dirty, grumpy gang of robbers. They were trying to act tough and menacing, but had sparkles all over them. Daring Do found the disparity of the sight amusing. The ancient texts say that this crown belongs with its sister, the tiara of Teotlale, which was worn by the Empress of the Desert Sands. Legend says Teotlale loved her sister Shalati so much that she wished they could be together, always. When Shalati was married off to another empire, Teotlale missed her so much that she cursed the jewels forever. She dangled the crown in front of Slingshot. He couldn't tear his greedy eyes away, and reached his hoof toward it. That's why it's doomed, get it? Daring Do winked and yanked the crown back, trotting back to her spot. Because if one of the two crowns is without the other for more than 14 moons, the night will become eternal, for every pony. Daring lowered her voice into a whisper. It's a good thing I know where the tiara of Teotlale is being kept, since it was stolen 13 moons ago. What a load of rotten hay, Northstar grumbled, and spit a large wad of apple-chewing taffy on the ground. He leaned forward and spread his wings out, preparing to take off. I'm really tired of talking, Sling. Next thing you know, she's going to be saying that the halo in the sky is real too, and every pony knows it ain't. Hush your muzzle. Slingshot held up a hoof to silence his comrade. I got this. Do you? Daring Do shouted over her shoulder as she broke into a gallop, heading away from the gang. Clouds of beige dust billowed up, creating a sandy haze. When it cleared, the pony saw a train chugging along in the distance, heading straight toward them.